Our passage today is the story about the baptism of Jesus. And this is in the life of the church here, the Sunday of the church here, when we talk about the baptism of Jesus. You'll notice that we had today the passage also from Isaiah 42, because that's going to help us to understand what the baptism of Jesus was all about. One of the things we spend a lot of time talking about in confirmation is the character of Jesus. And in order for us to live in the world and be a member of the church, that's a central piece of that, is to know who Jesus is, to know the things that Jesus did, to know how he acted, and especially to know the purpose of God in sending Jesus into the world. Now, of all the things that we might say about Jesus, today I want to focus on one aspect of Jesus that's evident in our passage today, and that is his gentleness. It was a central part of his life and his message and his character. Now, there was a new way of life that dropped off the water in John the Baptist's hands. It was a way for him to wash away the world and the way the world does things, to forget what's behind and to move ahead toward the future. Now, we have to admit that this world is ruled by violence. That we all know that despite our amazing technological evolution, the things that we can do today, someone can have a triple heart bypass and be up walking the next day. We can fly around the world. We think nothing of it. We have amazing amounts of information on very small microchips. And yet we have this feeling that despite all this technological progress, we still haven't progressed spiritually very far from those days of old, from the times of people like Herod and Pilate, in the life of our nations, and in our rulers, and in the way we take care of people. It's an important passage today in Isaiah 42, verse 3. It's a prophecy about the coming of the Messiah and the reason for a Messiah coming into the world. And it says, a bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not quench, until he faithfully brings forth justice. Boy, that's an image, isn't it? Have you ever seen a reed that's broken and it's kind of flipping in the wind, or maybe a leaf that's almost ready to fall off a tree? And we can see that there are some tender balances in the world and things that are just hanging on. People that are broken and they're just hanging on to their ability to live a life of meaning and purpose. And it all begins with water in our passage today, because water changes the world. Think about how our whole world has been changed throughout the history of the earth by water. And so also this is the great symbol that Jesus and the people of the Old Testament chose. And a call to follow Jesus is to be like water. A call to follow Jesus is to have that same gentleness that moves and changes the world in very gentle ways. Not like the rulers of this world. The gentleness of Isaiah, who was in slavery in Babylon. The gentleness of Jesus, which all of us could think of stories that demonstrated his gentleness and his ability to change things without violence or force. The gentleness of Paul. Think about all the things that Paul said. Let your gentleness be evident to all. One of the fruits of the Spirit that Paul identified was gentleness. It's not forcing your own way in the world and finding a way that is more effective. Now, in order to know Jesus, you have to know Isaiah. And in order to know Paul, you have to know Jesus. So we ask ourselves about our passage today, why were the heavens opened up? And why was there a voice from heaven that said, "You are my son, With you I am well pleased. What was the meaning behind that? You have to read Isaiah 42, the very first verse. Is an exact copy of the things that we hear the voice of God say from the heavens when Jesus is baptized. You can see it in our passage today. It's a little bit different translation. Here is my servant whom I uphold, my chosen in whom my soul delights. This is the person who has the answers that we need to live a spiritual life. Now, the gospel writers often do this. They often throw out the beginning of a psalm or the beginning of a piece of famous scripture, and they expect their readers to remember where it comes from and to be able to pick it up and from their own tongue remember the words. On the cross, Jesus begins to quote the Psalms, my God, why have you forsaken me? And the people of that day would have understood that little psalm continues to go on to a song of praise and trust that God will protect and save Jesus. And so in the same way, when we hear this heavens open, and we hear this voice from heaven, it's not a voice that comes from nowhere. It's not a new saying. It's something that the people of old believed would happen. And the Gospel of Matthew repeats this very same piece of scripture, Isaiah 42. And in fact, this is the longest piece of scripture that's ever quoted in the Gospel of Matthew. From chapter 42 of the book of Isaiah. He will not break a bruised reed or quench a smoldering wick until he brings justice to victory, and his name there will be the Gentiles' hope. That's what it was about. That's why he was there. Think about Isaiah. And he's writing. What did he write with? He wrote with a reed, dipped in some kind of a dye or an ink, and he would put it down with a lamp to be able to see. So he used the things that he had available to him as an image for a hope. I guess it's a way of saying a pen is mightier than the sword, maybe. That this little pen that he's working with that breaks so easily. Some of you used number 2 pencils when you were in school. Whenever we have a potluck here at the church, I always use those plastic forks, and I always break it. You guys ever have that where you're trying to get through the food, you go through it and it breaks? A bruised reed he will not break. A little candle that's almost going out, he's not even going to make enough motion for that little candle to go out. Because love is more powerful than force. There's a wonderful proverb in the Old Testament. A gentle answer turns away wrath. And if I can give you anything today, that's a practice for life, A gentle answer turns away wrath. Because in our human nature, a lot of times, the first thing we want to do is return evil for evil, right? That's part of our communion liturgy at the end. When we send you out into the world, we say to you, do not return evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted, right? Be gentle. Last week, I lined out the difference between the way the wise men approached Jesus and Herod approached Jesus. We can live our lives with faith or with fear. We can live our lives with gentleness or desperation. We can be disturbed when things happen to us in life, or we can be joyful. We can condemn other people and blame them for a problem, or we can become creative. We all know that we have terms in our society for when bad things happen, right? It was all right until someone blew up. It was all right until someone lost it, right? We all know what it is. They lost it. They lost their gentleness. They lost their ability to communicate. They lost their trust. They became disturbed. They started being condemning. And earthly leaders in our world today, they grow desperate. You see it all the time. he knew, as Martin Luther King knew, that the universe bends towards justice. And that's what our passage says today. The first thing that I want to say about gentleness is the main misunderstanding that most people have. Gentleness is not weakness. Gentleness, I want to put this in your mind, instead of gentleness being weakness. Gentleness is effectiveness. Think about how gentle water is. It's plied along your hand. It goes between the rocks. It goes into the ground. It's gentle. It's not harsh. But yet it's the most effective, powerful force on this planet. And water, the water of baptism, was a powerful force in Jesus' life. It's pliable. It's not just confined to Jesus. It extends to the disciples, to everyone. It transforms the world by its power. It is the one force that has most changed this earth. It's been said, love is the most durable power in the world. This creative force, so beautifully exemplified in the life of Christ, is the most powerful instrument available in humanity's quest for peace and security. Those are the words of Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King studied Mahatma Gandhi because he knew that the only thing that would bring lasting change to the world was peace and gentleness in the face of opposition. And I have a neat little piece of paper that Martin Luther King used to hand out before his marches. And he had a pledge that he had anyone who was going to march with him. They had to pledge these things. First of all, think about this. Meditate daily on the teachings and the life of Jesus. Number 2, remember always that the nonviolent movement seeks justice and reconciliation and not victory. 3, walk and talk in the manner of love because God is love. 4, pray daily to be used by God in order that all people might be free. 6, observe with both friend and foe the ordinary rules of courtesy. 7, seek to perform regular service for others and for the world. 8, refrain from the violence of fist, tongue, or heart. And 9, strive to be in good spiritual and bodily health. I like the way he says that. Strive to avoid the violence of fist, or tongue, or heart. Martin Luther King also said that justice delayed is justice denied. And also in our world today, there might not be what we would call overt violence, but there's always a passive violence when we fail to act when others need us. We fail to act when there's a lack of justice in the world. And love is action. It's not inaction. It's not weakness. It's not ineffectiveness. It's actively being involved for the good of others. We can remember then the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man did no violence to Lazarus physically, or maybe even through his heart, but he certainly did violence to the poor man at his gate when he did nothing. So today, more than anything, this passage points us to the reason that Jesus lived. It points us to realize that there are people in this world today who are bruised reeds, and they're just hanging on. There are smoldering wicks, and it's up to us as those disciples that all we had was armed with the message to strive to follow that Jesus. To first of all, to know that Jesus. To think about the kinds of things that he did, the things that he said, what he stood for, and most importantly, the purposes for which God sent him into the world. And really, of all the things that we might say about Jesus, it was